Welcome back to the Fearless Future podcast. We're your hosts, Glenn Schwarm.
And Amber Schwarm.
And today we want to talk about something near and dear to our hearts, evaluating a house. The number one thing that you have to have when you are going through a house is some type of a checklist that tells you what to look for. We created the Home Flipping Evaluator, and that's what guides us every step of the way as we evaluate homes.
Yeah, and if you try to wing it and just go in a house and think that you're just seeing everything you need to see, you're going to forget stuff. So having a checklist is super important.
One of the biggest mistakes I see rookies making all the time is that they go into a house and they forget to look for something. And usually it's something major, like, is the house on sewer or septic? Does it have a furnace? Does it have a boiler? Are the radiators in good shape? Things like that. They don't think to look for when they walk through a house because they're looking at just to see, hey, is it pretty or whatever? So you got to have a checklist. And so back in the day, we would get home, get very confused. And we were trying to remember which house was what. We had a notepad, we scratched stuff on. And that led to the birth of the Home Flipping Evaluator.
Yep.
A simple checklist we can walk through and go, is this okay as is, repair or replace? Because how long do you think it should take to go through a walkthrough in a house?
Half an hour, tops.
So you want to have an efficient method to do that. If you don't have an efficient method, you're going to be all over the place and you are going to forget key components of the house.
Right.
So maybe tell them how we designed that to go from outside to in.
Yeah. So like you said, it's outside to in. So when you first go up to a house, you're going to look at certain things all on the exterior. Again, it's all about efficiency. So rather than going, from the outside to the basement, to the attic, to the inside, it's designed so that you go from the outside in to make it efficient.
And we designed that so that you could answer one of three questions on every part of the house. And the three questions are:
okay as is, repair, or replace.
And that's what we need.
Right.
So once we have that information, we can then go back and estimate or evaluate the cost of the house. But we don't want to be complicated and try and do the estimation at the house. That's where so many rookies make that mistake, is they're trying to figure out the cost right there. I think you have to figure out what needs to be repaired or replaced and what you can leave as is. And then when you go home, you evaluate it, then you can run your numbers there.
Yeah. And not for nothing, but we did develop this for that reason, to be efficient. But also we were looking at houses in New York in the middle of winter that were not that didn't have heat on. And I can remember, and it's always colder in the houses than it is outside.
Always.
And I can remember getting back in the car and my toes were literally frozen. I had to take my boots off and warm my toes up. So for me, it was a matter of self-preservation, even to develop this to be most efficient. Yeah. So I could spend the least amount of time in these freezing cold houses as possible.
That was not fun. So I think there's two ways you can use this sheet. You can use it if you're doing a phone evaluation over the phone. So you can actually walk through, if you're asking the seller about things in the house, you can actually use it as a walkthrough when you're saying, hey, how old's the roof or how old's the kitchen?
Preliminary walkthrough, because you always want to verify that with your own eyes.
100%. Yeah, I agree. So good point. So then once you determine you're going to go to that house, then you want to use it when you get out and walk through the house. Because when you walk through, especially if you're going to walk through with a seller, it will make you look much more of a professional when you walk through with a checklist, as opposed to walking through going, oh, this is nice.
I think that'll do. Yeah.
And then when you come back and hit them with a lower number, which you're going to do, then when you come back and do that, at least they know you have some basis to why you're doing it. You're not just throwing them a lowball number.
Right.
It's a step-by-step process that takes you through. This is how much each part of the home costs. Right. So let's, you don't want to show up at the house and look like a boob.
Yeah.
You want to walk through like a professional.
Yeah.
So, you be part of Vestor Pro, be a professional.
Yeah. And we have that from start to finish, from the time you're going to look at the house and evaluate it to when you actually meet a contractor. We have the scope of work, which we're not going to go into today, but all the way through, you want to be set up and have your business designed to make you look like a professional and be a professional, not just look like one, but actually be one. Do this the right way.
Fake it till you make it.
This isn't even a matter of faking it till you make it. It's having the information that you need on hand to actually do it the right way so you can make intelligent, calculated, informed decisions.
Yes, but when you first go there for the first time, when you walk up with your Home Flipping Evaluator and you've never done this before, the confusing part is you're going to fake some of your confidence because you don't have to do an estimation right there on the spot because we have the numbers built in. Those are all of our numbers we have built in. You have to get your own numbers in there for yourself, but we give you a good idea where to start. But again, I think the 3-question system makes it simple. Is it okay as is? We're going to repair, we're going to replace. And that makes it look like you're actually doing something That might be the fake it. When you go back home and either call your coach, if you work with us, or if you do it yourself, at least you have the information. You go back. That was what I meant by fake it till make it. Okay. I didn't mean just go up and pretend like you're a real estate investor. So, all right, let's go down through. So real quick, there's 28 different steps to get through. We want to get through this pretty fast right now. I want to just go through this, and we'll give you a link here so you can download this for yourself. But by all means, let's just go through quickly. We have less than a minute for each one. Let's start with the first thing we're going to look at when we get out of the house.
Yeah. So again, we're starting from the outside. So we're going to look at the roof and the chimney. And, neither one of us had construction backgrounds, but you don't have to be a contractor or have that background to be a successful house flipper. You're going to look for things that just aren't right. If it doesn't look right, it's probably not. So, are the shingles curling? Are they missing? What kind of shingles are they? Is it a slate roof? Is it a tile roof? Is it a metal roof? Is it shingle? Is it 3-tab? Is it architectural? There are some things that you're going to want to get to know and learn. And I think that can be an intimidating factor when people get started. But I do want to say you're going to learn these things really, really quickly. They're not hard to learn, and these aren't complicated. Again, if it doesn't look right, it's probably not. Does the roof look newer? Does it look like it's, 400 years old? Remember that house, though? So there's always going to be exceptions to the rule. Do you remember that house we went to? It was winter. And I want to say it was in Guilderland. And we looked at the edge of there's snow on the roof.
Oh, I know what you're going to say. That was hilarious. So, yes. It was snowing that night.
It was snowing that night. So, but the edge of the roof looked totally fine. Like there were new shingles, and we're like, sweet.
I climbed up on a ladder.
You did.
I climbed up on a ladder and I cleaned off a section, and I said, oh, this looks great. This roof is brand new.
Yeah. And then we bought the house and the snow melted, and they had added like a foot on the garage or something.
That was the only new part of the roof.
Put a new roof on that section. The rest of the roof was old as dirt.
Literally a 3-foot section of roof was new that I uncovered with snow, and the rest of it was old. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So that was a mistake that we hit, but that was yeah, right. That was funny. So,
yeah. And the chimney. You
never know. Chimney, that's just important. Just take a look at it, see if there's bricks falling off, and go from there. So I want to move a little faster through these. So number 2 is gutters. Look at gutters on a house. I think it's important that so many people make a mistake with something like a gutter that they think because they want to have gutters on their house, they have to put it on the house they're going to sell.
That's a really big rookie mistake.
You can't do that. You have got to decide, does this house need gutters to sell? Will somebody say, I'm not going to buy this house because it doesn't have gutters?
Right.
If you need it for water relocation, that's important.
If you're using them to solve a problem, if there's a leaky basement and you need gutters to redirect the water so there's not a leaky basement, by all means put gutters up. But if you're just doing it for the sake of doing it because you would want gutters on your house, that's something a homeowner can do after they buy the house. You're not going to get a good ROI or a good return on your investment just for adding gutters for the sake of adding gutters.
No one's going to pay you more for your house because you have gutters on it. They're not going to pay you the $1,000 you put into it. That's not going to happen.
But if there's gutters there, see what kind of shape they are, see if they need any repair. Maybe there's a dented up downspout or something that you could fix.
These next 3 are pretty simple. The soffit is the area between the edge of the roof and as it butts up to the house. Just take a look around, see how that looks. And again, you're looking for 3 questions. Is it okay as is, repair, replace? Next is going to be the house exterior. Generally speaking, what are we looking for the house exterior?
So it depends on the type of exterior. Is it brick? Is it stucco? Is it siding? If it is it clean? Is it in good shape? Again, it's a repair, replace, or okay as is. Sometimes if it might need pressure washing if it's just dirty. It might need to be, the siding might need to be completely replaced. There might need to be stucco repair. So you're just looking at those type of things.
Next is going to be the driveway. When you pull up to a house, what are you looking for with the driveway?
You don't want something that has potholes and like a bunch of that kind of stuff in it. You want it to fit the neighborhood. Again, if it's your house, you might want a new blacktop driveway or concrete driveway so that it looks great. But when you're flipping a house, whether you're using it as a rental property or you're flipping it, you have to make business decisions, not emotional decisions. So don't do what you would do if it was your house. Do what the comps support and what the neighborhood supports. Do all of the other neighbors have nice, seal coated driveways that look sharp and shiny and black, or is yours like a pile of blacktop that's all falling apart,
right?
Of rubble. So you make decisions based on the information that you have.
I think you got to be very careful too. When you are looking at a house, rookies forget all the time that new homeowners literally spend the most money in the first year of home ownership because they want to add their gutters. They want to customize. Just because you painted a certain color doesn't mean they're going to not want to change it themselves or add something on or change a section of roof or whatever. They want to spend money. New homeowners want to spend the most money in their first year. So let them.
Yeah. And what are things that are deal killers or not deal killers? Because, will somebody not buy a house, to your point, if it has a new driveway or new gutters, or the next one is deck and fence on the list? I don't know that we've ever added a fence to a property. Is a fence a nice thing to have if somebody's going to move in with a dog and kids and all that? Yes, but that's something the new owner can buy.
Right.
And they don't, it's probably not, if they love the house, it's probably not going to be a deal killer for them if the house doesn't have a fence. They just assume, all right, we're going to buy it and have to put a fence in.
I think we have added a fence when someone bought a house. I think over the years we had to add a fence one time to close the deal. I think in the early days. I don't remember that.
But you could do that if you're having a hard time selling it and you use that as an incentive for somebody to buy. But you don't have to do it when you're in the process of flipping it.
They were able to pick the fence they wanted. Because if you put up a fence like that, odds are you're going to put up the wrong kind of fence.
Yeah.
They don't like it. It's the wrong color, wrong shape, wrong size.
We have added decks plenty of times.
Yes.
If it's a house that's going to sell in the spring or summer and we want it, to have this nice outdoor space where people could see themselves entertaining.
Yeah.
We have done that many times. Yeah.
Landscaping is your expertise. Talk about landscaping. This is really important because so many people make the mistake here of overdoing. So talk about this.
And landscaping, again, everything that we're saying here too, there's always going to be an exception to the rule. There are certainly high-end houses where we've done high-end landscaping. But as a general rule, landscaping, we take a more minimalist approach to it because not only do you have to pay for all the landscaping, but you have to keep it up while you're in the sales cycle. And landscaping needs watered, it needs weeded, and then it can end up just looking like
it's a pain in the butt.
It's a pain in the butt. And it costs a lot. Landscaping can be quite expensive.
Do you remember when we had, when we were doing this many, we have maybe 10, 12 houses at one time. We had to hire a guy
just to go around and water the plants.
Yes. He was a CEO or a COO for another company, but his evening job was to water plants and flush toilets in the house to keep the water flowing in the houses.
Right.
But his main job was to water plants because you do this beautiful landscaping. And then by the time we got to closing, it was all dead.
And I love landscaping. Like that's my go. I love a beautiful, you do want it to look good. So with all that being said, do take a minimalist approach. If there's existing landscaping there that you can trim up and make look good, by all means do that. Again, you want to make business decisions. In New York, we had a lot of houses that had huge oak trees, or not oak trees, but pine trees in the front. And, the bottom of the pine tree takes up the entire front yard. So what we would do, instead of spending $2,000 to have that tree taken down, we'd pay to have, the bottom, 8 or 10 feet of branches cut off so that it made it a nice shapely tree that you could actually see the front of the house again. So you can make really smart decisions without having to break the bank too.
That was something that I was amazed when you first said. I remember the first house we did that on was the hoarder house that
Ricky.
that had so many. It was a bad hoarder house, and the shrubs in the front of the house had turned to trees.
Yeah, they were so big.
They were over the roof.
You literally couldn't see the house.
Yeah. And I remember you saying, I said, this pine tree has to go. And you said, that's going to cost us like $3,000. It was a huge pine tree. You said, let's just chop it. And I was like, just take the branches off. What do you mean? And sure enough, you did that. It
transforms.
It did. All of a sudden, all the light was in the house. I said, you got to be kidding me. I think we paid like $600 or $700 as opposed to $3,000. So it was a big savings. So yeah, I learned a lot from you on that one. That was good. Next, we have things like exterior doors and windows. When you're walking around the house, what are you going to look for exterior doors and windows?
Windows, especially, those are easy to see whether they're old or not, whether they're double pane or single pane. That's a pretty easy thing to look for. Exterior doors, we almost always replace the front door just because they get banged up over time. In rare cases where it really fits the character of the house and it's in good shape, you can keep it. But most of the time, those tend to get replaced. Windows, in the early days, we actually did keep a lot of them, even though they were old. We just were able to paint them.
Yes.
And there are some historical houses where you're not allowed to change the windows.
That's a whole different episode, historical houses.
That's pretty rare. But windows seem to be something that if you don't replace them, you're going to get hit at closing on. People do tend to like the new energy efficient windows. So I think in recent years, we tend to just have that be something that we switch out.
And then, of course, you have the garage. You're looking at the garage. That's just really to see, is it detached? Is it attached? That's important to notate on your home flipping evaluator.
Sill plates. We had a lot of experience with that. Sill plates.
Sill plates is the base. It's what hooks the wood part to the concrete in a garage. So look and see if that's rotted. And I have to tell you, I'm not a contractor. I've learned this through trial and error. It takes time to learn these things, but you'll learn. And once you learn something, it's not that hard to remember. The very first deal we ever did, we got a credit back on the sill plates. I remember the inspector saying that. So that was something that we learned. And this is a little side note. Use a home inspector, but learn from the home inspector.
I was just thinking the exact same thing. Follow them around like a little puppy dog. Like soak up everything you can, what they're looking for. And don't get one that's an alarmist. We always tell people, there's inspectors that'll just, freak out about every little thing. Oh, well, that's going to cost you. Oh, that's going to cost you. And that's going to cost you. And this is a deal killer. But if you get one that's not an alarmist, because remember, almost everything can be fixed with money. But does your budget, do you have enough in your budget to make this a good calculated decision?
Right. Next is going to be foundation and basement. We can kind of put those together. But the foundation and basement, again, I'm not a foundation expert. You don't have to be a house flipper. But you do have to use the school of thought. If it doesn't look right, it probably isn't. So if something looks crooked, out of line, out of shape, you'll start to learn what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in basements around the country if you have basements in your country or in your country, in your state rather, or your area. So you'll find that out.
Foundations, are the walls cracking? Do you see a lot of like stress cracks? That sort of thing in a basement. Is the stone crumbling? Remember that one basement we went in the Swinger house? We talked about that on a different podcast.
Yes.
But there was actually they like carved a channel through the basement floor.
A creek went through there.
A creek actually went through the basement.
A creek with like a foot of water.
It was insane.
It wasn't a little bit of water.
No.
It was a lot of water going through. They said, oh yeah, during the rainstorms, it gets pretty high down here. I said, I bet it does.
Yeah.
That was crazy. So now we have HVAC and HWH. That's HVAC. So your heating and AC. And then your hot water heater. And all we're asking is, again, you don't have to be an expert to look at it and see. Look for the dates. I think so many people miss the fact that you can just look at dates on there and see how old it is. And sometimes their service records are on there as well. So you have some idea, who installed it. You can also, if you want to, you could research that company and find out when that was installed as well.
Right.
This is information too, when you get to the research phase of this, if you're not sure, you can call building departments a lot of times and find out when things were put into a house.
Right.
That's usually information you can get. Depends if they have to request a FOIL now. I don't know what they do now, but yes, they do.
And then number 14 is electrical. And I know it's like electrical and plumbing stuff can tend to be a little intimidating to some people. But again, you learn this pretty quickly, and there's not that many things that you have to learn. But like, electrical panels, right on the panel usually is the little switch at the top that'll tell you what size the panel is. Is it 150? Is it 200? It's not like watching that old movie, 220, 221, that'll do the job.
Mr. Mom.
Mr. Mom. But they're pretty easy, and there's things like in older houses, there might be fuses, there might be knob and tube. There's not a lot of variations, there's a lot of things you have to remember.
Yeah. And again, you'll learn this as you go. Again, all you're looking for is look okay as is. Do I have to repair? Do I have to replace it? And as long as it has breakers, you're probably okay with electrical panel. Plumbing, we're looking for certain different types of plumbing. We're saying, do we have PEX? PEX is the blue and red piping that you see. Mm-hmm. That's the newer version of
copper.
I was going to say plumbing.
Yeah.
Because then the copper was before that. So copper was before that. Copper's certainly good to have as well. Then there's old iron pipes. Yeah. And if you have iron pipes, there's a good chance they'll have to be replaced.
Because they're probably clogged.
They're probably clogged with minerals on the inside.
Yeah.
So we've cut those open and said, wow, there's no water going through here at all.
It's like a pinhole.
So that's something you want to look at with that. And with plumbing, framing and sheetrock, that just says, am I going to be doing more work around the house? Am I going to be tearing walls down, adding any kind of an opening, adding any kind of rooms?
Am I taking any walls down?
Right. What am I going to do there? And then next is the kitchen. I'll let you speak to the kitchen. This is probably the most important part, kitchen and bathrooms. So just share with us what people should be looking for when they walk into a kitchen, because I would say, how many do you think get replaced on a regular basis?
Probably 9 out of 10.
Right.
I think, typically they're older. If they're not older and you can, and sometimes the decision might depend on, am I flipping the house or am I keeping it as a rental? So those are different variations, but kitchens and baths sell houses. So if you are flipping it, especially, this is where you want to spend some extra money, because this is where you're going to get a big bang for your buck. But again, don't go overboard. You don't make decisions based on if you want to live in the house. You know, if you lived in the house, you might want hard surface countertops. You might want upgraded appliances. You might want those kind of things. But if this is a house you're flipping, look at your comps and base your decision on those. And there are some really low budget ways to get a big pop and make your house, make your kitchen really sing, like adding backsplash tile, for example. You can paint the backsplash and it still looks finished. It still looks done, but it doesn't look wow. And when you want your potential buyers to come in the house, especially if you're flipping it, you want them to be like, wow, this house feels so custom. This is the house I have to have. I just want to come in and unpack my boxes. So adding things like, hardware on the cabinets instead of just nothing, or adding crown molding so the tops look finished, or adding a microwave instead of a Vent-A-Hood. It's literally like $100 more. But people go in there and start nesting and they see that they don't have to take up countertop space with something like a microwave, for example.
If you want to get top dollar for the house, you're going to have to take a house that's, let's say, worth $300,000 and make it feel like it's worth $500,000. Right. These little things that you're talking about right now, these are important.
That are not budget busters.
Correct.
They're low budget items that make a big impact.
And that's going to be in the kitchen, it'll be your backsplash,
hardware,
countertop,
crown molding. Those kind of things make it feel very rich.
That's how you get top dollar for a house.
Okay. Exactly. And bathrooms the same way.
You know what I'm thinking about right now?
What?
Out of the blue, the guy with a goat. Remember the guy with the goats in his house?
Gosh.
So we used to, in the early days, to save money, we would find scratch and dent refrigerators, appliances. Yeah. And hopefully they were scratch and dent on the back or the side that was going to be hidden by the cabinet. And this guy's house, this guy was like a meth guy, like a meth head. And he got these appliances. Remember that? It was in the ghetto.
I do. And
we used to get many from, but the guy had a goat and it's like, oh, come on in. I'm like,
there's a goat in your house.
You have a goat in your kitchen. He's like, yeah. I'm like, okie doke. But we got good deals off him. So do what and it got, when we couldn't scale at some point because he didn't have enough appliances for us. But in the early days, we're getting stuff for, 20 cents in the dollar.
Right.
So it was a great deal for us. So kitchen, bathrooms, I'd say the same thing for bathrooms.
Yeah, bathrooms, instead of putting a fiberglass surround in the tub or shower, put tile. It doesn't cost that much more, but it makes the house feel very custom.
Yeah. And again, instead of putting a frameless mirror, just like a mirror slab, basically, put a framed mirror. Doesn't cost any more, but man, does it make it look so much better. Right. It makes a big difference. You've always been a master at doing that. Again, taking a space that could be blah and you make it feel like it's $1 million bathroom or $1 million kitchen, and it's not. But to a person that's coming in expecting a $200,000 house or a $300,000 house, and they feel that $500,000 vibe, they're going to open their wallet up. Yeah, and they're comparing it to other houses that they've looked at that do have those crappy builder grade finishes. Correct. And you make it look that much better. And again, it's not that much money to do that. Interior doors, we almost always have to replace those. The exception is if they're old and really characteristic of the house. If they're in good enough shape, you can save them. But probably 9 times out of 10, we have to replace the doors to make it feel modern and new. Next is interior paint. And paint is your biggest ROI in a house, return on investment, because you can always paint and caulk will make, I said that right? You did. Paint and caulk. I want to say that wrong. Make sure you have that L in there. I know. So I make sure the L is overemphasized. I want to make sure. So paint and caulk is your most important thing that you can do to make any house look a ton better. Yes. Like totally modernize the house, even if it's really old, as long as the walls are smooth and you can paint that. So make sure that you just plan to paint the entire house. Talk about painting trim versus the wall and the different colors, because I think a lot of rookies make the mistake that they're going to save money. So talk about the difference, why you should make things pop. Yeah. Some people want to just go in there with a sprayer and spray everything the same color. I think the very first house that you ever bought, that's what you did. White on everything. It's just vanilla. White just on everything. Vanilla on everything. Yes. It just again makes the trim really pop and stand out if you have a color on the wall, and it doesn't have to be a dramatically dark color. It can be a beige or a gray or a yellow or whatever, something light. And then make your trim usually a nice bright white. Again, there's always exceptions. If you want to do, dark trim, or the house already has, really nice wood trim, maybe you don't want to paint it. But I think it really does make the trim stand out and just makes the house look nicer overall. So the next is lighting and curtain rod. Let's talk about this because it's always a question we get. People say, why do you put up curtain rods? And there's a very specific reason for it. Let's talk about it. Yeah, the curtain rods we put up just for staging purposes only, because when you're flipping a house and long gone are the days where people are driving around neighborhoods looking for house signs for sale. Everybody's looking online. So if your house is totally empty, the pictures are going to look very blah.
and cold. And typically when you're renovating, you're using very neutral colors on the walls, on the countertops, on the floors to appeal to the broadest range of buyers. So by putting up curtain rods, and I'm talking about like the $5 ones that you get at Home Depot or Walmart.
Right, the cheap ones.
Just so we can, put up a set of curtains that add a pop of color so that the pictures look good. And as far as lighting goes, we typically use pretty inexpensive lighting, especially in like the bedrooms and closets and hallways and stuff. But there are a few areas where you might want to splurge a little bit. Like if there's a formal dining room, spend $200 or $250 on a light versus the $60 one that you can just get. And it just like really sets the tone for the renovation. It makes people feel like it's a good thing. And maybe in the master bedroom, if it's a nicer master, maybe you do add a ceiling fan in there, or maybe you do add a chandelier over where the bed would go or something like that. So there's a couple areas where you want to spend the extra money, but you don't have to go crazy on all the lights in the whole house.
As you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, not only is paint a huge ROI and kitchen's a huge ROI, return on investment, and bathrooms, but lighting really is too, because you can spend a couple $100 and it feels like a few $1,000s more. If you have a beautiful chandelier you spent $250 on, you walk into a kitchen and go, wow.
And there's some really great options.
There are some
really great options for lighting.
They really are.
That don't break the bank.
Right. So be smart about that. Next, we walk into hardwood flooring, and hardwood flooring is one of those things that, as time goes on, there's less and less hardwood floor because they've been sanded down. But hardwood flooring, I think, is important. If we have hardwood floors, we want to save those in a house.
Absolutely. Even if they're pretty damaged, there's a lot of little tricks of the trade that the hardwood floor crews can make it look really good. Whether it's staining it a darker color, whether it's sanding some of the either pet urine or water stains out. Their hardwood floors are very, very desirable. And even today, if the house doesn't have hardwood floors and you're putting it in, there are some fantastic options for LVP or luxury vinyl plank that people can use. They're super durable. They're almost waterproof. They're really great options. And again, most of those are less than $5 a square foot. Some of them you can get for even $2 or $3 a square foot.
I'll put you on the spot for a minute. How would somebody go learn about LVP and flooring and that kind of stuff? Where would you recommend they do?
My go-to would just be to go to Home Depot and talk to the people there, or
Yes.
Floor and Decor, or a flooring store, and get educated.
Just hang out there and learn, and you'll be amazed when you start seeing. Then you start to get an idea what things might cost.
Right.
And you can say, okay, this room was a 10 square foot room, so if you can sort of estimate, if a 10 square foot room and the LVP is going to cost you $5, whatever it is,
$2 to install it or something,
right. And you get all that information from Home Depot.
Right.
You start to build this out for yourself as you start to learn. The next three are carpet, tile, and vinyl. That's for if you're going to put carpet down instead of, or different kind of flooring down. That's all it is. So that's what those three categories are for. And the last three are demo. There's always going to be some money for demo, even if you're tearing things out or getting the old kitchen out or the old bathrooms.
There's always more demo than you think there is.
Always. I think that one thing that people make a mistake on early on is that they think they don't need a dumpster.
Mm-hmm.
They'll just get rid of this stuff. They'll just put it in their car. We did. I think we had a trailer or a car. We tried to get rid of stuff at the dump, and it just get the dumpster.
The time it takes.
The $500, $1,000. Yeah, it's so much easier to have a dumpster come out, and you'll always need more than you think.
Yeah, because think about it. A lot of times you're getting rid of all of the stuff in the kitchen, all the cabinets. You might be getting rid of carpet for flooring, and then there's also all the boxes that the new stuff comes in.
Mm.
That's a lot of debris.
Boxes and styrofoam and packing and everything that goes with it, right? Yeah. And crates and everything else.
Yeah, have a dumpster or two.
So next is permits and architects. I'd like to talk about this because I think that people think when you're a flipper that you don't get permits, and that is not true. If you're a crappy flipper, you don't get permits. Or if you're trying to circumvent the system, you don't get permits. But the truth of the matter is, you need to get permits if you are going to flip a house because of a lot of reasons. And you have some great points I want you to point out.
Yeah. I think people, again, kind of demonize the inspectors. They're scared of them. And they do have a lot of power. They can make or break your job. Sure. So make friends with them and think of them as an asset to your business, because especially if you're brand new, the inspectors are an extra set of eyes on making sure your contractor's doing things that they're supposed to do. So
let me interrupt you. Do you remember when we learned that?
Oh, I remember.
So Mickey Mahar was our building inspector. He's since retired.
For the town of Rotterdam.
Yes. And we were doing our third flip.
Mm-hmm. And on Putnam Road.
We had those guys who said they'll side our whole house for like $1,000. We're like, yeah, it turns out they were stealing the siding. We didn't know all that. We didn't understand at the time. I thought he had extra inventory or whatever. But he was out back. They were trying to put a deck together and they were using penny nails and they the sonotube. So a sonotube is what you dig in the ground, and that's the footing that you pour concrete in.
And it's supposed to go so many feet deep.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to go 4 feet down or 6 feet down, I think it was. Whatever the number was, it was supposed to go that far down so that it would be below the frost line. Well,
they were cutting them in half.
Cutting the tubes in half and putting it in the ground. So he looked around and said, see how that tube's cut in half? He knew all the tricks of what con men would do. Yeah. And he told us, and we quietly got away from those guys. We heard they were felons and everything else. So we quietly got away from those guys. But he had our back.
Yeah.
He was out there to tell us, guys, that's not right. Like what they're doing on that deck right now, that is not right. They don't know what they're doing.
Because
get them out of here.
For those that don't know, penny nails would have rusted in the first year.
And the whole thing was a disaster. But anyways, go on with the inspector. I think it's important to just talk about inspectors. You mentioned that they need to become your allies. Be nice to them,
especially if you're new. You know, yes, be nice to them. You know, if you're having a hard time, like one of our students, Alicia, the inspectors get busy, and so sometimes it can take a few days for them to arrive to your job, and that might hold up progress. So I think she called him and said, hey, I have your favorite coffee waiting for you if you can make me your first stop tomorrow.
Yes.
You know, that's an incentive to get an inspector to show up.
I think he did.
He did.
Yes.
He absolutely did.
So that was great.
So, you know, there are things that you can do. And, you know, we've had really good relationships with inspectors, but do think of them as an asset and don't be so scared of them and do things the right way. Yeah. You know, the last thing we want to do is encourage people to do crappy flips and give our industry a bad name. So by doing things the right way, the way you're supposed to do them. And our motto was always find the least expensive solution to fix the problem the right way.
Right.
So not just, you know, cob something in there for the sake of getting it done cheap, but do it the right way.
If you don't get a permit and you get caught by the building inspector, your life will be hell. There's no question about it, because that building inspector could shut your job down for weeks or months. Yep. And then when you ask for a favor, can you get out here? I need this inspected. I need the plumbing inspected because the sheetrockers coming tomorrow. You know what the inspector says? I don't care.
Yeah.
And they don't have to care. So I think it's so important that you remember that they can hurt you if you try to circumvent the system, and you get black flagged as a company who skips out on inspections. You're in trouble. Do you remember early on we had the house that I didn't spend $1.50 on a new battery? We walked into the house that night. We just bought it. We walked in and I go, man.
A freezing cold house.
I go, it's freezing here. Why is this so cold? And it was kind of a hoarder house. And I looked up and the thermostat was blinking. It said battery. And I was not thinking about, I got to replace the battery. I wasn't thinking about that. I did other things. Came back the next day.
All the pipes had busted.
All the pipes had busted because the house had froze. And so that $1.50 battery would have saved me all that trouble. But what happened was we started to take down sheetrock in that house to do a small repair. Didn't realize that in that particular city, you had to get a permit if you took down more than like 4 square feet of sheetrock. And we took down literally like 8 square feet of sheetrock. And so because we were over the limit, we got blackballed.
And we had to bring everything up to code.
We had to bring everything in the house up to code, or that room up to code. Yeah. And they made it tough. Now, we played dumb. We were dumb. We said, I'm so sorry. We're just doing sheetrock, because in one town over, you didn't have to have a permit for that.
Right.
So make sure that you know your permit requirements or architect requirements in every town you go to, because they can vary from town to town. Yeah. That's crucial. So.
And architects, you don't always have to have an architect. No. You know, there were some towns where we could just if we were converting an attic into master suite, we could just sketch it out on a piece of paper and that was fine. But there's other places that are going to require you to have an architect.
Yeah. Last but not least is cleaning and staging. I think it's important that you have a professional come clean the house, because contractors are notorious for just smearing, not cleaning. Yes. And then also spend a little money on staging the house, like Amber said before. That's going to be crucial. So listen, that is a step-by-step kind of through the home flipping evaluator. When you're looking at this sheet, just remember a couple of things. Number one is that the numbers on there is the numbers that we use in our flipping business in upstate New York. You should check them, double check them for your own area and insert your own numbers in there just to make sure it works for you, because you may get things cheaper than we get it. You may have an uncle who does plumbing or masonry, or you may be a painter yourself. So those are going to be cheaper for you. So you can evaluate that and change that in the home flipping evaluator. And then, of course, there's a calculation at the bottom, which we go through in other videos on how to use that. But for right now, this entire sheet, here is the purpose of this as we wrap up. The purpose of this sheet is for you to learn what your MAO is. And your MAO stands for?
Maximum allowable offer.
That's the most you can pay for that house and still make a profit enough to cover any risks and everything in the property. And that's the maximum you should pay. You want to certainly pay less than Mayo, but that is where the purpose of this is to say what needs to be repaired, how much will it cost me? That way I know exactly how much I can offer for this house. If your Mayo comes out to be $200,000, that's the most you can pay. Your first offer needs to be $100,000. That is for a very different podcast. So we'll go over how to do negotiating, or we've already done, I think, for negotiating. So, but that's the purpose of the Home Flipping Evaluator, is get you in the right direction. So that is for a future episode. If you want to get your hands on this Home Flipping Evaluator, we're going to make sure there's a link right here, wherever you are. Click on the link below, grab it, and take a look at it for yourself. And we hope it helps you out in your flipping business.
That concludes this episode of the Fearless Future Podcast. If you like this, make sure that you click that like button, and then make sure you also subscribe and turn on notifications.